we'll go ahead and start. And first of all, Dominic, it's absolutely fabulous to see you again because I haven't seen you since our coaching together. And it was an unbelievable delight to get an email from you last week when you shared that how you were looking at your someday maybe list and you saw these two possible next actions to bring forward, which is just sharing your experience from coaching and also wanting to just reach out to David for thanking him for creating this methodology, and then also just wanting to share the experience that you had going through virtual coaching with me. And then the other one was you wanting to share about what does it mean being in the New York City area under quarantine and how GTD has really helped you through that. So please first introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Meg. A little bit about myself. So I'm in New York. I'm from Queens, and I'm all over the Queens and Long Island, all the boroughs, all over the island, and all over upstate. I'm an entrepreneur. I have had several businesses in the past, and I've been using GTD as a system. I want to say about 10 years now, more or less. It's not 10, it's approaching 10. And in the New York City area specifically, it's as chaotic as everybody can imagine it is. And people in large groups and a lot of fear and uncertainty just sort of amplifies everything. So having a system that is there is really keeps you kind of grounded.
Yes, and tell us a little bit, even though we know things are just so different right now for all of us. Think about before you even were introduced to GTD. You talked about knowing about this for about 10 years. What was your life like before that? Tell us a little bit about kind of that. Before you discovered GTD?
Yeah. So before I discovered GTD, and in my article, I wrote a little bit how I first heard about it. But before I discovered GTD, I feel like I was like most people. So I let myself be interrupted by the latest and loudest, as David says. And I thought at the time that's what a good manager, a good business person does, is sort of make themselves available to the people around them. And how I changed that was I took back ownership of my time and my thought process, because it was latest and loudest. So I took ownership of my time and my thoughts. I was in business a few years already, and the bombardment of communication, digital and personal, was extremely high. And I had no system to handle that. And then on the personal side, that I have a lot of hobbies, and I'm in New York, so my social life, I kind of like it, and I needed that balance and a clear head. So it was pretty typical of someone who needs to find, like, there's got to be a better way. So that's how it was before I found the system.
So one of the things that's really interesting about what you just shared was this quote unquote kind of open door policy. Because you do want to be available to people, and you don't want to have the perception of not being available. So you keep the door open so that, as David says, you're having those drive-bys all the time. Hey, do you have a minute? Hey, do you have the minute? Hey, do you have the minute? And you might be in the middle of doing some deep work, and then you have to pull out and handle what comes at you. And then you're trying to do that deep work. And remember, one of the things that we talked about in coaching was that threefold nature of work. That part of your
Of course.
day. Yes. Right. And
Finding your work, doing your work, and what's the other one? Do, define, or defer.
It's the doing predefined work, defining your work, and the unplanned. After we worked on the mechanics of your GTD process, we're really working on that threefold nature of work, which is ensuring that you had the time for doing predefined work, that you had the time to do the defining time. Now you knew how to do it, and then you could evaluate that against the unplanned. Um, a
Right.
question is, what problems were you trying to solve before you started to install and implement GTD? I mean, you just kind of alluded to a little bit, but what other things did you feel like you were saying, hey, Meg, these are the things that I really want to address in this coaching?
Well, that was the biggest problem, is the interruptions part, but by no means it was the only problem. I mean, it's never one big thing. It's always
Mhm.
a lot of little things. Like, I was waking up at 3 a.m. forgetting something. I did have a bill that I might have missed a payment. I did have a stack of papers here and there, and managing my not my time, but managing my behavior and scheduling my time. And over time, everybody just sort of gravitated, and they were doing GTD without realizing it, which is a sort of a subliminal message. And you know, so, it's a long answer, but it wasn't. It was a lot of little things, and I needed that. As I wrote in my article, I needed that. I needed to level up as a business person and as a person in general.
Well, what you were sharing about all those little things, that's what you and I were talking about, all that drag, right? All that
Yeah.
drag that you were experiencing, and that I was going to help you alleviate that drag. And that's one of the things that GTD could do, because all that little thing was pulling at you, and it was pulling at your attention. Even about what was the best way for you to use the time commuting, right? And what was the
Oh
best
yeah.
time
Yeah.
to use your mornings, and what was the best time to use your day, and all those little things that were really had your attention and didn't really know how to solve and alleviate. And so I think that
Right.
that's so much of what your experience of GTD was doing, was really solving those particular problems and issues that you couldn't have figured out beforehand. And
Right.
that was one of the main reasons of why you sought us out for coaching. Um,
Right.
can you just take us to the moment when you realized the GTD methodology was actually working for you to solve these things that were really kind of nagging at you?
I had several businesses, and I've been in a few different industries. So I like to do things like take a month off of work. I've taken up to 6 weeks off of work, and I was fine. That peace of mind was really allowing me to enjoy my time away. Um, and right now, before we were under quarantine, mandatory quarantine, I spent nearly 5 months working on a couple of new projects, and I was literally working 7 days a week for almost 5 months, in several locations, and I was going to classes 4 nights a week. And all through that time, I was still never missing a meal, getting enough water, getting enough sleep. I didn't miss a workout. Um, my social life sort of dipped down a little bit, understandably, but that was my sacrifice. So that was okay. But I've never been busier than I ever was before March, before quarantine. I was never busier, and I was never simultaneously so clear in my mind with a workload that I know would break most people. So that's a couple of examples of when I saw it early on, and then even right to this day, I'm like, wow. So
And And tell us now what life looks like. I mean, I think you just kind of were talking about that. I think that you've been describing kind of, you know, pre-GTD and post-GTD. What would you want people to know about GTD? What do you think that sometimes the perception is, and versus what your experience has been about GTD? You know, I think that people really want to hear it from people that who've actually been through the coaching and been exposed to it. What would you want people to
Okay.
really kind of know about saying, wow? Because I think that what was so powerful when you wrote to David and I is you shared about the return of the investment.
Absolutely. It turns from let's say an app into a way of thinking. It starts off as one thing, and it becomes another. So I think most people, probably a lot of people that you meet, they have that cry for help, and they're looking for an app, a trick, a hack, a little something. So maybe they might want to get cool gear, and their problems are solved. But it's, sorry to say, it's not going to happen. You definitely have to commit uh, to the system for like 2 years or 10,000 hours, or however long it's going to take you, because even though lots of parts of our lives are compartmentalized, the brain is always on. And that's that elevated level of thinking that I feel that most people who give up on the system don't get. This training is just as important as if you want to be an Olympic athlete or a trained martial artist, or anything that's working at a higher level. So unfortunately, you're not going to find any shortcuts, because the system reveals your weak points, just like any good training will do. And it's going to be painful sometimes. Now, I don't want to be all negative about it, um, but I always look at things as how bad do you want a clear head? And I've attempted to introduce GTD to I don't know, so many people over the years, and they can't seem to get past the basics because of whatever reason. And to me, that's a red flag. It's like, well, your problem is not this, your problem is you. And unless you really look inside yourself, you're not going to change anything in your life. So it becomes a system, it becomes a pile of paper and folders, or an app, it becomes your phone. It starts out as that stuff, and then it becomes this elevated mindset to where you have like a superpower, like the force, like I wrote in my article. You could
You were so
do
great about that. Expand on that a little bit. That was so great that you were talking about that.
so I anybody knows, even if you're not a Star Wars fan, everybody knows what the Force is. Everybody knows what the Jedi mind trick is, right? So that's sort of the elevated level that I'm talking about. Is you have you've downloaded this system, you've downloaded this information, and you've put to practice that Jedi master training, to where now you're able to literally, take on the whole world and take on the whole galaxy. It's equivalent to a superpower, and I am not kidding about that. It's an awesome feeling, and it's very, very empowering. So but anyone who's watched Star Wars knows that Jedi training is not easy, but it's definitely worth it. And you can't just hand somebody a lightsaber and say, okay, you have the power now. You can't do that. Just like you can't download an app and have that power. You have to go through the training, and it's a process. So that's probably my message to everybody who's done it or who's thinking about it, is give it its respect, and it will come back to you 10 times over. Because that stack of notebooks that I emailed you, my stack of filled up notebooks, there's $100,000 worth of ideas in that actually came to pass. So, and now what I'm doing now in my life is I have, I have what I want. All right. So now it's like, what else do I want? All right, let me get after it right now. Let me do it right now. And I'm starting right now, and I'm going to do it. So that confidence is very empowering.
So one of the things that I find really fascinating when I got to work with you over the course of really, almost a good 6 to 8 months, we were working together. And what I love when I have the opportunity to do that with somebody is I get to help them with the ebb and flow of losing control and getting it back, and losing control and getting it back, or losing perspective and getting it back as life comes at us. And I think that what has been so really it's, how do I say this? What's really been so heartwarming is to hear from all of our clients that we've been working with during this time, and sharing how GTD has really helped them during this pandemic, and and how it has allowed them to, I've been saying this for so long. I've been saying this for like the last month, is I'm like, yeah, David's second book was called Ready for Anything, right? So David's book is called Ready for Anything. And all the people that have been coming to us and sharing their stories have been able to say, just like that, just like in a day, I had to recalibrate my project list. I had to recalibrate my roles and responsibilities. I'm doing weekly reviews. I was just talking with somebody this morning that was saying, I've been doing a weekly review every day because so much is changing.
Right.
And, she's now coaching, well, she's not coaching, but she's working, teaching her kids, as well as being an executive director. Her husband is also at home. And they're just really just thriving during this time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not easy, but they're talk about turning all those problems and issues into projects and actions. And so people have been coming and sharing their stories during this time, and sharing how they've turned all these problems and issues into projects and actions, how they've been really being able to recalibrate and renegotiate their project list and their roles and responsibilities very quickly and very elegantly, so that they're back into that appropriate engagement with their work with a capital W, both personally and professionally. And that's why it was so great when you reached out to us and shared your story about here you are in Queens, with everything that's happening in your area, and yet how you're able to have and hold that mind like water, and have appropriate engagement, and be ready for anything. All those things that David has been talking about has just been even especially very important for all of us to be able to tap into our practice. And so it's just been so unbelievable, the stories that have been coming out, since this has all begun, of all these GTD practitioners, versus when I'm looking at these other people that don't have a systematic approach to get this done. So, not only have they had to deal with everything that they've had to deal with, they're also dealing with tens of thousands of emails in their inbox and all their paper. And a lot of people were able to pack up their offices very quickly and go to their home office because they already had their cockpit set up.